What would you do if you saw a lioness, one who had just lost all her cubs, curling her massive body around a freezing kitten in the middle of the African savannah? Most people would think she was the moments away from killing it. Most experts would say such a thing could never happen. But what unfolded over the next few weeks didn't just defy logic. It shattered everything we thought we knew about instinct grief and the wild heart of a mother. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And get comfortable, take a deep breath, because what happened next is a story you will never forget. The cold that morning did not belong to Tsavo. It crept over the savannah like a stranger, laying a thin veil of frost across the dry grass and thorny acacia trees. The wind moved slowly across the plains, whispering through the tall yellow stems, carrying with it a silence that felt heavier than usual. Even the birds, normally loud at sunrise, seemed to have forgotten how to sing. Ranger Kitten stepped out of his battered land cruiser and pulled the collar of his jacket tighter around his neck. His breath hung in the air like smoke. "This isn't normal," he muttered quietly to himself. In the 20 years he had worked as a ranger in Tsavo, he had seen heat that cracked the earth open and storms that flooded the riverbeds overnight. But mornings like this, cold enough to sting the lungs, were rare. He lifted his binoculars and scanned the northern stretch of the reserve, where a group of lions had been roaming for weeks. The savannah looked endless from his vantage point. Low acacia trees dotted the landscape like scattered umbrellas, their twisted branches silhouetted against the pale orange sky. At first, nothing moved. Then something caught his eye. A shape. Kitten adjusted the focus on his binoculars. Under the shadow of a lone acacia tree, a lioness lay pressed flat against the ground. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't hunting either. Her body was curved in an odd position, almost like she was shielding something beneath her. Kitten frowned. That's strange. He lowered the binoculars, took a few careful steps forward, and raised them again. The early morning light was still weak, making it difficult to see clearly. The lioness's tawny coat blended almost perfectly with the dry grass around her. But something beneath her moved, just slightly. Kitten's heartbeat quickened. He leaned forward, turning the focus wheel slowly until the image sharpened. And then he saw it. Something small. Something orange. It trembled weakly beneath the lioness's belly. Kitten inhaled sharply. "A kitten," he whispered. The tiny creature was barely visible, pressed against the massive body of the lioness. Its fur was a bright orange tabby pattern that looked almost unreal against the dusty grass. The kitten's body shook violently. Even from a distance, Kitten could see the uneven rhythm of its breathing. He zoomed in further. The kitten's ears were flattened against its head, and its small nose had turned slightly purple from the cold. It looked as if it had been frozen overnight. The poor thing was curled tightly into itself, its tiny paws tucked under its body, as if trying desperately to preserve whatever warmth it had left. Kitten swallowed. A house cat. Out here, it made no sense. A kitten had no chance of surviving on the open savannah, not with predators' cold nights and miles of wilderness surrounding it. But what truly stunned him was not the kitten. It was the lioness. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't even showing the slightest hint of aggression. She was protecting it. The lioness shifted slightly, lifting her head. Kitten recognized her immediately. "Nala," he said softly. Every ranger in that sector knew her. 2 weeks earlier, Nala had been one of the most devoted lion mothers in the region. She had 3 cubs, playful, curious little bundles of fur that followed her everywhere. Kitten had watched them grow through the reserve cameras, tumbling over each other in the grass, wrestling beneath the acacia trees. But 2 weeks ago, something terrible had happened. Late one night, one of the camera traps captured the moment. A pack of hyenas had ambushed the cubs. The footage was difficult to watch. Nala had fought with everything she had, clawing, biting, roaring. But the hyenas were too many. In the chaos, one cub was dragged away first, then another, then the last. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes. By the time it was over, the cubs were gone. Since that night, Nala had never returned to the pride. The rangers often heard her distant roars echoing across the savannah after dark, long, haunting calls that sounded less like territorial warnings and more like grief. Sometimes she wandered the same stretch of land where her cubs had once played. Sometimes she simply lay in the grass for hours, as if waiting for something that would never come back. And now somehow she had found this kitten. Kitten reached for his radio. "Control, this is Kitten," he said quietly. "I need someone to pull the nearest camera trap footage from Sector 4. Something strange is happening out here." The response crackled through the radio. "Copy that, Kitten. Give us a minute." While he waited, Kitten kept watching through the binoculars. The kitten shifted weakly, letting out a thin, broken sound. A tiny meow that barely carried across the distance. It was the sound of something too tired to cry properly anymore. The lioness heard it too. Nala lowered her head. Her nose touched the kitten gently. For several long seconds, she simply sniffed it. Kitten watched closely. Predators usually reacted to unfamiliar animals with curiosity first, and then with violence. But Nala did something else. She licked the kitten. Once. Softly. The small pink tongue of the lioness passed gently over the kitten's head, smoothing the tangled fur. The kitten didn't run. It didn't even try. It simply pressed closer to her. Kitten felt a strange tightness in his chest. "Control," the voice returned over the radio. "We have the footage." "Send it," Kitten replied. Within minutes, the tablet mounted inside his vehicle displayed the video feed from the night before. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. The footage showed the empty savannah under pale moonlight. Then from the edge of the frame, a tiny shape stumbled into view. The kitten. It moved unevenly, its little legs wobbling as it crossed the dry grass. Behind it, faint lights from a distant village flickered along the horizon. "Poor thing must have wandered out from there," Kitten murmured. The kitten stopped in the middle of the clearing. Its body shivered violently. The temperature that night had dropped close to freezing. The kitten looked around, disoriented. Then it collapsed into a clump of grass. Minutes passed. The kitten barely moved. Then at 2:31 a.m., another shape appeared. Nala. She walked slowly through the grass, her head low as she listened to the faint sounds of the night. Suddenly she stopped. Her ears tilted forward. Another weak meow drifted through the darkness. Nala turned. Step by step, she approached the tiny orange bundle. The kitten saw her coming. Its body stiffened. If it had the strength, it probably would have tried to run. But it didn't. It simply curled tighter into itself. Nala stopped just inches away. She lowered her head and sniffed. The kitten trembled. The camera showed Nala standing there for a long time. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30. Then slowly she reached forward and licked the kitten. Back in the present, Kitten lowered the tablet. "Unbelievable," he whispered. Through the binoculars, he watched Nala carefully shift her body. She lowered herself to the ground beside the kitten. Using one large foreleg, she gently pulled the tiny animal closer to her stomach. The kitten slid against her warm fur. Almost immediately, the trembling began to slow. Nala curled her tail around the kitten like a living blanket. The difference in size between them was almost surreal. The lioness weighed over 130 kilograms. The kitten probably weighed less than half a kilogram. But in that moment, she treated it exactly the way a lion mother would treat her cub. Kitten shook his head slowly. "You've got to be kidding me." The quiet didn't last long. A sound drifted across the savannah, high-pitched, laughing hyenas. Kitten stiffened. From the western side of the clearing, 4 shapes appeared. They moved low to the ground, their shoulders rolling with that familiar, unsettling gait. Hyenas had incredible noses. They could smell weakness from kilometers away, and right now, a freezing kitten was the easiest meal imaginable. The first hyena stepped closer. Then another. Their eyes locked onto the orange bundle beneath the lioness. Nala lifted her head. The change in her posture was instant. She rose to her feet in one smooth motion. Her back arched. The fur along her shoulders bristled. And then she roared. The sound exploded across the savannah like thunder. Kitten felt it in his chest, even from hundreds of meters away. The hyenas froze. They had expected weakness. Instead, they were facing a furious lioness. Nala stepped forward, placing herself directly between them and the kitten. Her teeth were fully exposed now, and her tail lashed violently behind her. One of the hyenas took another cautious step forward. Nala roared again, louder. This time the hyena stopped completely. A few seconds passed. Then one by one the hyenas began to retreat. They backed away slowly, keeping their eyes on Nala. Finally, they disappeared into the tall grass. The clearing fell silent again. Nala stood there for a moment longer, scanning the horizon. When she was certain the threat had passed, she turned back. The kitten had curled into a tight ball. She lowered her head and licked it again. Slowly, carefully. Then she lay down once more, pulling the kitten against her belly. Through the binoculars, Kitten felt his throat tighten. A lioness who had lost her cubs. A freezing kitten that had wandered into the wrong world. And somehow, against every law of nature, they had found each other. "Control," Kitten said quietly into the radio. "You're not going to believe what I'm looking at right now." He paused, watching the strange pair beneath the acacia tree. A lioness who lost her cubs just became a mother again. Could a tiny kitten really grow up safely in a dangerous savannah like this? Tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Before we move on to the most incredible part of this story. The sun rose slowly over Tsavo the next morning, spreading pale gold light across the endless savannah. The frost from the night before had melted into thin silver threads of dew along the dry grass, and the acacia trees cast long shadows across the earth. From his lookout ridge, Ranger Kitten had barely moved since dawn. He had slept for maybe an hour inside the Land Cruiser, but his mind had refused to rest. What he had witnessed the night before, the lioness protecting a freezing kitten, had replayed again and again in his thoughts. He lifted his binoculars once more. Nala was still there. But something had changed. The lioness slowly rose to her feet, stretching her powerful limbs as the sun warmed the earth around her. The tiny orange kitten stirred weakly beneath her belly. For a moment, Nala simply looked down at the small creature. Then she did something that made Kitten lean forward in disbelief. She lowered her head carefully and took the kitten gently into her mouth. It was the exact same way lionesses carry their cubs. Her massive jaws, capable of crushing bone, closed softly around the kitten's scruff. Not a single tooth pierced its skin. The kitten let out a faint trembling whimper but didn't resist. It hung there helplessly, its tiny legs dangling beneath Nala's chin. "Unbelievable," Kitten whispered. He quickly marked the coordinates in his notebook. This was something few wildlife researchers had ever seen: an apex predator carrying a creature that should have been its prey. And yet, Nala moved with extraordinary care. She began walking slowly across the savannah. Each step was deliberate, each movement controlled. The kitten swayed gently with every stride like a fragile pendant hanging beneath her chin. After several minutes, Nala stopped near a stretch of cracked earth, where a dry riverbed cut through the grasslands. There she lowered the kitten back onto the ground. The tiny animal collapsed for a moment, then struggled to its feet. Its legs were still weak, but it tried to follow. The kitten wobbled after Nala like a drunk little shadow. It took 3 steps, then 4. Then it stumbled and fell face first into the dust. Nala stopped immediately. She turned back, her golden eyes fixed on the small creature. The lioness walked back toward it and gently touched the kitten's head with her nose. The gesture was so soft it barely disturbed the grass. The kitten lifted its head. Encouraged, it tried again. And this time, it managed to follow her a little farther. Kitten watched the strange pair moving across the savannah, the massive lioness and the tiny kitten trailing behind her like an unlikely cub. "It looks like she's teaching it to walk," he murmured. Nala slowed her pace even further. She adjusted her movements, always making sure the kitten never fell too far behind. When the terrain became rough, she picked it up again. When the ground flattened, she let it walk. The scene looked almost surreal. From a distance, it resembled a mother guiding her young through the wilderness. But this cub had whiskers too long and paws too small for any lion. Kitten knew immediately that the situation had grown too unusual to keep to himself. He reached for his radio. "Control, this is Kitten," he said. "You need to send someone out here. I think we're witnessing something extraordinary." Within the hour, a small research team had assembled near the observation ridge. 2 wildlife behavior specialists arrived, first followed by technicians carrying long-range cameras and GPS trackers. They set up quietly, careful not to disturb the lioness. The researchers took turns peering through binoculars. "What exactly are we looking at?" one of them asked. Kitten pointed. "Follow the lioness." The man adjusted his lens. Seconds later, his jaw dropped. "That can't be right." Another researcher took the binoculars, then another. Each reaction was the same: shock, confusion, and then silence. "She's treating it like a cub," one woman finally said. Indeed, Nala's behavior mirrored the actions of a mother lion perfectly. She constantly glanced behind her to check on the kitten. When it lagged, she slowed. When it collapsed, she waited. And when it strayed too far, she nudged it gently back toward her side. The team began documenting everything. High-powered cameras recorded every movement. GPS tags tracked Nala's position. Field notes filled page after page. Yet none of them could explain what they were seeing. One of the researchers scratched his head. "Maybe it's psychological substitution," he suggested. "She lost her cubs recently." Kitten nodded slowly. That's exactly what happened. He briefly explained the hyena attack from 2 weeks earlier. The researchers fell quiet again. Grief could do strange things, even in animals. But this was something else entirely. By late morning, the research team contacted a specialist who knew more about lion behavior than anyone else in the region. Dr. Amina Okoye. She arrived in the early afternoon. When she stepped out of her vehicle and looked through the long-distance camera feed, she froze. The lioness was lying in the shade of a massive baobab tree. The kitten sat beside her paws. Dr. Amina studied the image carefully. Then she noticed something unusual. Nala was licking her own chest repeatedly. Not in the way lions groom themselves, but in the way mothers stimulate milk production. Dr. Amina leaned closer to the screen. Her eyes widened. "She's trying to trigger lactation," she said quietly. The team looked at her. "You mean Yes, Amina replied. Her body might still be capable of producing milk. She crossed her arms thoughtfully. After losing cubs, the maternal hormones don't disappear immediately. Sometimes the body still believes the cubs are alive. She gestured toward the kitten. That tiny animal might be activating the same maternal response. Kitten frowned. But it can't survive on meat yet. No, Amina agreed. It's far too young. She paused. If she can't feed it properly, it will die. Everyone fell silent. They watched as Nala rose to her feet again. She disappeared briefly behind a cluster of bushes. Moments later, she returned, dragging the carcass of a small antelope she had hunted earlier. She dropped it beside the kitten. Using her front paws, she tore off a small strip of meat. Then she pushed it gently toward the kitten. The kitten sniffed it. Then it recoiled. Its nose wrinkled. It made a tiny complaining sound and retreated closer to Nala's paw. It was too small, too weak, and too unfamiliar with raw meat. Nala watched carefully. Her head tilted slightly. She nudged the meat closer again. The kitten didn't touch it. Instead, it pressed its face into the lioness's fur and let out a weak cry. Something in Nala's expression changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It looked like confusion, almost sadness. She lowered her head and licked the kitten slowly. Once, then again. The team watched for nearly an hour. The meat remained untouched. By sunset, the kitten had eaten nothing, and that worried everyone. That night, the temperature dropped again. The research team switched on thermal cameras to monitor the lioness and her strange companion. What they saw was remarkable. Nala barely slept. Instead, she remained half awake, constantly alert. Whenever the kitten shivered, she pulled it closer. Whenever it stirred, she licked its fur to stimulate warmth. At times, she even adjusted her body to block the wind. The kitten curled tightly against her stomach. Its tiny body glowed orange in the thermal imaging, and Nala's massive frame radiated warmth around it. The difference in temperature was the only reason the kitten remained alive. Every few minutes, Nala made a low rumbling sound, a soft vocalization lionesses use to comfort their cubs. The kitten responded with faint little mews. They sounded almost like whispers. Across the savannah, the wind moved through the grass, the sky filled with stars. And in the middle of that vast wilderness, two animals from completely different worlds lay together like mother and child. But the team's concern continued to grow. The next morning, the kitten still hadn't eaten. Kitten rubbed his temples. "It's been 3 days," he said quietly. Dr. Amina nodded grimly. "I know. If it doesn't get proper nutrition soon..." She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew the outcome. The kitten might have warmth. It might have protection. But without food, it had only days left. Kitten watched the pair through his binoculars again. The kitten slept against Nala's chest. The lioness rested her head gently beside it. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. But the truth was harsh. If a miracle doesn't happen soon, Kitten said softly that Kitten won't survive. Dr. Amina looked toward the horizon. "Then we can only hope," she replied, "that Nala is capable of something even more extraordinary than we've already seen." And none of them knew just how right she was. The fourth morning arrived under a pale gray sky, the kind of sky that often settles over Tsavo before the sun fully claims the day. A thin wind moved through the dry grass, carrying the scent of dust and distant animals across the savannah. From their observation ridge, the research team had barely slept. 3 days had passed since the kitten had eaten anything. 3 days of watching, 3 days of hoping, and 3 days of wondering whether they were witnessing the beginning of something miraculous, or the slow approach of something tragic. Kitten adjusted his binoculars again as the first rays of sunlight began warming the ground. Then he heard it, a sound so thin and desperate that it made everyone on the ridge freeze. The kitten was crying, not the faint, broken whimper they had grown used to hearing over the past few days. This was louder, longer, a drawn-out cry of hunger. The tiny orange body trembled as the kitten tried to stand beside Nala. Its ribs were now clearly visible beneath its fur. Its belly had collapsed inward from starvation. The kitten stumbled toward Nala and let out another weak cry. The lioness lowered her head immediately. She licked the kitten again and again, her rough tongue sweeping across its back in slow strokes. But the kitten kept crying. It pushed its head against her chest. It pawed weakly at her fur. Kitten swallowed. "It's starving," he whispered. Dr. Amina Okoye stood beside him, arms crossed tightly. "I know." The kitten collapsed again, too weak to stand. Nala circled it once. Then something changed in her posture. The lioness slowly lowered herself to the ground, but not in the way lions usually lie down. She rolled gently onto one side. Dr. Amina suddenly leaned forward. "Wait," she said sharply. Everyone focused on the screen. Nala had positioned her body in a very specific way. It was a posture every wildlife researcher in Africa recognized instantly. The posture of a nursing mother. The kitten, still crying faintly, lifted its head, almost as if guided by instinct, almost as if some ancient memory had awakened within it. The tiny animal staggered toward Nala's belly. For a moment it hesitated, then its nose brushed against the lioness's underside. Nala responded immediately. She lifted one massive paw and gently pulled the kitten closer. The kitten's mouth found a nipple. There was a pause, a heartbeat of silence. Then the kitten latched on and began to suck. Kitten felt his breath catch in his throat. No one on the ridge moved. No one spoke. For several seconds, the only sound was the wind brushing the tall grass. Then the kitten's tiny body began to move rhythmically. It was drinking. Dr. Amina's eyes widened. "My God," she whispered. "She's producing milk." The team looked at her in disbelief. "That shouldn't be possible," one researcher murmured. But Amina shook her head slowly. "It's rare, but it can happen." She kept her gaze fixed on the screen. After a mother loses her cubs, the hormonal system doesn't always shut down immediately. Sometimes grief combined with the presence of a small infant can reactivate lactation. She exhaled softly. This kitten may have triggered the same maternal response her cubs once did. Below them, the kitten continued to nurse. At first, its movements were weak, but gradually they became stronger. More desperate, more determined. Nala didn't move. She remained perfectly still, her head resting against the ground, as if she understood that the smallest movement might interrupt the fragile moment. Minutes passed. Finally, the kitten released its grip and lifted its head. For the first time since anyone had seen it, the small creature did something new. It tried to stand, and this time, it succeeded. Its legs still trembled, but its eyes were brighter. Its ears perked slightly. The first miracle had happened. From that moment on, everything began to change. Nala allowed the kitten to nurse several times throughout the day. Each feeding strengthened the tiny animal a little more. By the 6th day, the difference was undeniable. The kitten no longer collapsed every time it tried to walk. Instead, it followed Nala, still clumsy, still uncertain, but alive. When Nala stood, the kitten scrambled after her. When it fell behind, she slowed down. Sometimes she even wrapped her tail gently around the kitten's body, pulling it closer, as if guiding it along. At midday, Nala would lie down in the shade of an acacia tree and allow the kitten to climb onto her stomach. There it slept for hours, its tiny body rising and falling with each breath. From the ridge, the research team watched in awe. "I think it's going to survive," Kitten said quietly one afternoon. Dr. Amina nodded. "For now." She paused, but the savannah is not finished testing them. Her words proved prophetic. Late on the 7th day, a new presence appeared on the horizon. At first, it was just movement in the tall grass. Then the shapes became clearer. A male lion, massive, his mane dark and thick, almost black at the edges. Behind him walked 2 adult lionesses, and trailing them were 3 young lions, juveniles, just beginning to learn the art of hunting. Kitten lowered his binoculars. "Jabari," he said quietly. Every ranger in the region knew that name. Jabari was the dominant male of the territory, and nothing happened in his domain without his knowledge. The male lion lifted his head. His nostrils flared. He had caught a scent, something unfamiliar, something that didn't belong. The pride began moving toward Nala. On the ridge, the team fell silent. No one needed to say what they were all thinking. If Jabari decided the kitten was prey, it would die in seconds. Below them, the kitten sat beside Nala's front paws, unaware of the approaching danger. Jabari walked forward slowly. His massive shoulders rolled with each step. He stopped about 20 meters away. His amber eyes locked onto the tiny orange creature. One of the lionesses in his pride noticed it next. Her lips curled back. She released a low warning growl. The kitten froze. It sensed something now. Something wrong. The small animal scurried backward and pressed itself between Nala's legs. That was when Nala stood. Her entire body stiffened. She stepped forward, placing herself directly between the pride and the kitten. Her back arched slightly. The muscles along her shoulders tightened like coiled rope. Then she roared. It wasn't the deep territorial roar lions use to claim land. It was sharper, fiercer, the unmistakable roar of a mother defending her young. Jabari answered with a roar of his own. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath the sound. Dust lifted from the earth. For several seconds, the 2 lions stood facing each other. The distance between them was barely 10 meters. The air felt heavy. Every animal on the savannah seemed to hold its breath. Jabari took 1 step forward. Nala didn't retreat. She stepped forward too. Her jaws opened wide, revealing teeth built to crush bone. Another roar exploded from her chest. The message was clear. "Come any closer, and there will be a fight." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Then something remarkable happened. Jabari stopped. He studied Nala carefully. Then he looked down at the kitten peeking out from behind her legs. Finally, he turned away. Without a sound, the great male lion walked back toward the grass. The lionesses followed. The juveniles trailed behind. Within moments, the pride disappeared into the savannah. On the ridge, the research team exhaled all at once. Kitten wiped sweat from his forehead. That was too close. Below them, Nala turned immediately toward the kitten. She lowered her head and began licking its fur rapidly, checking every inch of its body. The kitten squeaked softly but didn't move away. It simply leaned against her. Another test had passed, and life continued. 2 weeks later, the transformation was astonishing. The kitten was no longer a fragile survivor. It was thriving. Its fur had grown thicker and shinier. Its eyes were bright and curious. Instead of wobbling behind Nala, it now trotted after her with surprising confidence. Sometimes it even ran ahead. Nala's patience was extraordinary. If the kitten climbed onto a rock and struggled to descend, she waited. If it wandered too far, she gently picked it up in her mouth and carried it back. During the hottest hours of the day, Nala rested beneath the shade of scattered trees. The kitten had developed a favorite habit. It climbed onto Nala's back. The first time the researchers saw it happen, no one spoke. The tiny orange body crawled slowly up the lioness's shoulder. Then it curled into a tight ball against the thick fur of her mane and fell asleep. Nala didn't move, not even when flies landed on her ears, not even when the wind shifted the grass. She remained perfectly still for nearly an hour. Kitten lowered his camera slowly. "I've never seen anything like this." Dr. Amina nodded. "Neither have I." Sometimes the kitten slept against Nala's shoulder. Other times it burrowed into the thick fur around her neck. From a distance, it almost looked like a strange patch of orange fur growing from the lioness herself. But every so often the kitten would twitch in its sleep and let out a tiny purring sound, and Nala would lower her head to check on it. These moments became the team's favorite observations. They began referring to them quietly as the lioness and her impossible child. But as the kitten grew stronger, its curiosity also grew. It began exploring the grass around Nala. Sometimes it chased insects. Sometimes it batted at dry leaves blowing across the ground. Nala watched closely, always ready to intervene. Still, the savannah was unpredictable. One afternoon, the kitten wandered into a low patch of grass several meters away. Nala had just turned her head to scan the horizon. For a moment, she lost sight of it, and that was all it took. The kitten suddenly froze. Its ears flattened. It looked upward. A shadow swept across the ground. High above them, something enormous was descending. A martial eagle, one of the most powerful birds of prey in Africa. Its wings stretched wider than 2 meters. Its talons could crush the spine of a small antelope. To the eagle, the kitten was perfect prey. The bird folded its wings and dropped. The attack happened in seconds. The kitten didn't even have time to run. But Nala heard the sound, the rush of air, the warning cry of nearby birds. The lioness exploded into motion. She launched forward like a missile. Dust erupted beneath her paws. Just as the eagle reached striking distance, Nala leapt. Her roar ripped through the air. The eagle twisted sharply, avoiding the lunging lioness by a fraction of a second. Its talons sliced through empty air, barely centimeters above the kitten's back. With a powerful beat of its wings, the eagle shot skyward again. The kitten screamed. Nala landed beside it instantly. She pushed the small animal down into the grass with her head. Then she began licking it, furiously calming it. On the ridge, the researchers stared in stunned silence. If she had been 1 second slower, someone whispered that eagle would have taken it. Dr. Amina nodded slowly. Nala just saved its life again. The kitten eventually stopped trembling. It pressed its tiny body against Nala's leg, and Nala stayed there beside it, watching the sky, watching the grass, watching everything. From that moment on, the lioness never let the kitten stray far again. To the rest of the world, they were predator and prey, a lion and a cat. But here on the harsh plains of Tsavo, they were something else entirely. A family no one had ever imagined could exist. In the days following the eagle attack, the mood among the rangers and researchers changed. What had begun as amazement slowly turned into concern. From the observation ridge overlooking the savannah, Kitten watched Nala, and the small orange kitten moved through the grass as the afternoon sun painted long shadows across the land. The kitten trotted close to the lioness's legs, occasionally stumbling, but always catching itself again. Each time it wandered a little too far, Nala would gently guide it back with her tail or nose. To anyone watching from afar, it looked like a peaceful scene. But everyone on the ridge knew the truth. The savannah was not peaceful. It was unforgiving. Dr. Amina Okoye lowered her binoculars and sighed. No matter how fiercely she protects it, she said quietly, this place will always be dangerous for something that small. She began listing the threats one by one. Eagles, snakes, jackals, hyenas, even other lions. Kitten nodded slowly. He had spent most of his life in Tsavo. He knew how quickly life could disappear out here. If we do nothing, Amina continued softly, that Kitten won't survive for long. The words hung heavily in the air. Kitten ran a hand through his hair. I know. The problem was obvious. But the solution was not. Intervening could provoke Nala. A lioness protecting a cub, no matter what species that cub belonged to, was one of the most dangerous forces in the wild. If she thinks we're taking her baby, Kitten said quietly, she won't hesitate. The team fell silent. Yet none of them could accept the alternative. Standing by and watching the kitten die was not an option. Eventually, Amina spoke again. We need a plan. And so the planning began. They studied Nala's movements carefully over the next several days. The lioness had developed a fairly predictable routine. She hunted mostly at dusk or late at night when temperatures dropped and prey animals moved across the plains. Those hunting trips were the only times she left the kitten alone. That small window of time would be their only chance. The team installed additional infrared cameras throughout the area. Tracking devices were used to monitor Nala's movements from a safe distance. 2 ranger vehicles were positioned several hundred meters away, ready to provide support if things went wrong. Even with all the preparation, the plan was dangerous. If Nala returned unexpectedly while they were retrieving the kitten, the outcome could be disastrous. One evening, as the team gathered around the map table inside the mobile command tent, Amina looked around at the group. We're not just rescuing a kitten, she said. Her voice was calm but firm. We're making a decision that could affect Nala's life as well. Kitten nodded. He understood what she meant. Taking the kitten away would break the bond that had formed between them, but leaving it there might mean certain death. It was the kind of choice that weighed heavily on everyone involved. Finally, the night arrived. The cameras recorded Nala leaving the area shortly before midnight. She moved toward a herd of antelope grazing several hundred meters away. Kitten watched the live tracking feed carefully. Wait for it, he murmured. The glowing dot representing Nala continued moving farther across the savannah. After several minutes, Amina leaned closer to the screen. She's far enough. Kitten nodded. Let's move. 2 rangers stepped quietly into the tall grass. They moved slowly, careful not to make sudden sounds. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale silver light over the plains. The small kitten was exactly where they expected it to be, curled inside a shallow patch of dirt where Nala had made a resting spot. Its tiny body rose and fell gently with each breath. Kitten approached carefully. The kitten stirred. Its eyes opened, wide, confused. For a moment, it simply stared at the unfamiliar shapes approaching it. Then it let out a small, uncertain meow. Kitten crouched down slowly. It's okay, little one, he whispered. The kitten didn't try to run. It simply watched him with tired eyes. Within seconds, one of the rangers placed a soft blanket over the kitten and gently lifted it into a rescue carrier lined with warm cloth. The kitten let out a soft cry. The sound broke the stillness of the night. Kitten closed the carrier door carefully. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's go." The team began walking back toward the vehicles, but halfway there, they stopped. Every muscle in Kitten's body suddenly froze, because something had appeared in the darkness behind them. A shape, large, silent, and terrifyingly close. Under the faint glow of moonlight, Nala stood only 10 meters away. No one had heard her approach. The lioness stood completely still. Her golden eyes reflected the moonlight like two burning embers. Her gaze was fixed on the carrier. Inside, the kitten shifted and let out another small cry. The sound echoed softly across the grass. No one moved. No one even breathed. If Nala decided to attack, there would be no time to react. Slowly, very slowly, the lioness began walking toward them. Each step was careful, measured. The grass parted silently beneath her paws. Kitten felt his heart pounding against his ribs. "She knows," someone whispered behind him. Nala stopped beside the carrier. The kitten cried again. The lioness lowered her massive head. She sniffed the carrier. Then she sniffed the kitten inside. The moment stretched into eternity. There was no roar, no growl, no threat. Only silence. Heavy, painful, almost unbearable. Kitten watched as Nala remained there, breathing slowly, absorbing the scent of the small creature she had protected for weeks. The kitten responded with a faint meow. For a moment, Kitten thought the lioness might try to open the carrier. Instead, Nala lifted her head. She looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something impossible to explain. Then Nala took a step backward. Just one. But that single step carried a message louder than any roar. Take it. Save it. The lioness stood still as the engine of the ranger vehicle started. She did not chase them. She did not growl. She did not protest. She simply watched. Kitten glanced back through the rear window as the vehicle began driving away. Nala was still standing there, a solitary figure in the moonlit grass, watching until the car disappeared into the darkness. The kitten was taken to a nearby wildlife rescue center. Over the next week, it received specialized care, warm food, medical treatment, a safe environment. Slowly, its strength returned. Its fur became thicker and shinier. Its eyes grew bright and alert. Meanwhile, the rangers continued monitoring Nala, and what they discovered was heartbreaking. Every day, the lioness returned to the same patch of grass where the kitten had once slept. She would sit there quietly. Sometimes she lay down and curled her body into the exact same shape she had used to protect the kitten from the cold. Sometimes she pawed the dirt-gathering leaves and grass into a small nest, as if she still expected the kitten to return. The behavior continued day after day. Kitten watched the footage in silence. "She's waiting," he murmured. Amina nodded softly. "Yes, she remembers." The image of Nala sitting beside the empty nest affected everyone who saw it. It was the silent language of loss. A week later, the team made a decision. The kitten had recovered completely. It was healthy, strong, and curious. But it could never live permanently in the wild among lions. Still, they felt Nala deserved one last moment, one final goodbye. Early one evening, the rangers placed the carrier at the edge of the savannah near the place where Nala often appeared. They stepped back and waited. Minutes passed. Then movement stirred in the grass. Nala emerged slowly from behind a cluster of acacia bushes. She walked cautiously toward the carrier. Inside, the kitten heard something. Its ears perked up. The door of the carrier was opened. The kitten stepped out. For a moment it hesitated. Then it saw her and ran. The tiny orange body rushed across the grass straight toward Nala. The lioness lowered her head. The kitten pressed its face against her leg, rubbing its head against her fur as if no time had passed at all. Nala bent down and gently licked the kitten once across the top of its head. The gesture was soft, almost like a whisper. Then she lifted her head, turned, and began walking away. She did not pick the kitten up again. She did not try to bring it back with her. She did not even look behind her. It was as if she understood. The kitten did not belong to the world of lions. Its future was safer with humans. Before disappearing into the golden light of the savannah, Nala paused for a moment. Just a moment. Then she continued walking until the grass swallowed her silhouette. Behind her, the kitten remained where it stood. Quiet, watching, not crying, just staring at the place where the lioness had vanished. And in that silent moment, everyone present understood something extraordinary. Love had existed there, even between two creatures who should never have shared the same world. 2 years passed. In Tsavo, time had a way of moving both slowly and all at once. Seasons shifted. Grasslands browned, then greened again after rain. Herds moved across the horizon in long, patient lines. New rangers arrived at the rescue station, while others transferred out carrying stories of the savannah with them. And life, for the most part, returned to its usual rhythm. The small rescue station near the edge of the reserve settled back into routine morning feedings, medical checks, maintenance rounds, radio calls, and the endless work of protecting whatever fragile lives crossed its path. The tiny orange kitten that had once nearly frozen to death beneath an acacia tree was no longer tiny. He had grown into a healthy, strong adult cat with bright amber eyes and a coat of deep orange stripes that caught the afternoon sun like flame. The rangers had named him Ginger, and over time he became something of a legend around the station. Every new ranger who arrived eventually heard the story. At first, it was usually told with a smile, almost like campfire folklore. About the freezing kitten, about the grieving lioness, about the impossible bond that had made even veteran wildlife officers stand speechless under the African sky. But then someone would lower their voice and say, "No, really. No, it happened. Kido saw it. Amina saw it. The cameras saw it." And the story would stop being a myth. For the people at Tsavo, Ginger was no longer just a cat. He was proof that the wild could still produce moments beyond logic. Moments so strange and tender they made even the harshness of the savannah feel almost sacred. Ginger lived in the small animal care enclosure near the station's outer edge. It was comfortable, clean, and secure with shaded platforms, climbing posts, warm bedding, and regular checkups from Dr. Amina Okoye whenever she visited. He was fed well, treated carefully, and given more affection than most animals at the station. The staff adored him. He rubbed against boots during morning rounds. He perched on windowsills while radios crackled in the office. He leapt onto supply crates and watched everything with the sharp, serious gaze of a creature who believed he was far more important than his size suggested. And yet, despite living among humans for most of his life, Ginger never behaved quite like an ordinary house cat. He preferred tall grass to soft blankets. When his enclosure door was open for supervised outdoor time, he often ignored the warm corners and shaded wooden platforms built for him. Instead, he would slip into the tallest patches of grass near the fence line and lie perfectly still, his ears twitching, eyes fixed on the open savannah beyond. Sometimes he climbed to the top of sun-baked rocks and sat there for long stretches, scanning the horizon with a strange stillness that reminded Kitten of a lion watching over its territory. And every now and then, Ginger made a sound that always caused the staff to pause. Not quite a meow, not quite a growl. Something lower, rougher. A tiny chest-deep rumble that sounded uncannily like the broken beginning of a lion cub's call. One of the younger rangers laughed the first time he heard it. This cat grew up thinking he's a lion. The others smiled. But Kitten, standing nearby with a mug of coffee warming his hands, only looked out toward the distant grasslands and smiled quietly to himself. He knew exactly why. Because some lessons were learned in the body before they were ever understood by the mind. And in the earliest, most fragile days of Ginger's life, warmth had come wrapped in tawny fur, with a heartbeat deeper than thunder and a tongue rough as bark. In moments like that, Kitten always thought of Nala. He had not seen her in a long time, not since the day she turned her back and walked into the savannah, leaving Ginger in human hands for the second and final time. Over the years, there had been occasional reports from rangers in neighboring sectors, sightings of a solitary lioness with old scars and a steady, deliberate gait. But lions moved. Territories shifted, lives unfolded far from human eyes. No one knew for certain where Nala was now, only that somewhere out there, if she was still alive, she belonged to the same vast land that stretched beyond the station each evening like an endless breathing thing. One warm afternoon, the station carried on as usual. The air had softened after the day's heat, and the sky above Tsavo was beginning to melt into shades of gold and burnt orange. It was the kind of evening that made everything look suspended between memory and dream. A ranger opened the gate to Ginger's outdoor yard and let him roam. He knew the boundaries well. Ginger had done this dozens of times. He rarely ventured far, usually just a few dozen meters at most, chasing insects through the grass, weaving between dry logs, leaping onto rocks, and returning when he grew bored or hungry. No one was especially worried. The outer zone of the station was well monitored, and Ginger knew the area. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He sprang after a grasshopper, climbed a low log, paused on a flat stone, and flicked his tail in the fading light. Then he moved a little farther than usual, a little beyond the familiar circle. The tall grass beyond the yard rustled with evening sounds, small rodent movements, insect wings, the subtle crackle of dry stems bending in the breeze. Something caught Ginger's attention. His head turned sharply. He crouched. Then he slipped forward deeper toward the edge of the savannah. No one noticed immediately. Inside the station, a generator needed checking. One ranger was filing reports, another was cleaning equipment from the day's patrol. The sun dropped lower. Orange faded into copper. Copper into violet. When a staff member returned to close Ginger's enclosure for the night, she stopped in the doorway. The bedding was empty. The platforms were empty. The water dish untouched. She looked around once, twice, then called out casually, "Ginger." No answer. At first, they assumed he was hiding nearby. That was not unusual. Sometimes he curled beneath crates or vanished into a patch of dry weeds, just to make the staff come looking for him. So they began the usual search. Under the steps, behind the supply shed, near the fuel drums, along the fence line. They called his name in the easy voices people use with animals they love and expect to find any second. "Ginger. Come on, boy. Where are you, nothing?" As the minutes stretched into an hour, the mood changed. Kitten stepped out from the main office and saw the way people were moving now, not casually, but quickly, tightly, with mounting tension. "What's wrong?" "Ginger's gone." Kitten turned toward the outer grasslands at once. The last light of evening was sinking behind the horizon, and the savannah beyond the station was already darkening into shadow. A chill passed through him. If he wandered too far, he said quietly, "This place won't forgive a mistake." No one argued. By the time full darkness settled over Tsavo, the search had become urgent. The station mobilized fast. Rangers divided into small teams. Jeep engines rumbled to life. Headlights swept across the nearby grasslands in wide, white arcs. Flashlights and thermal scopes were brought out. Radios crackled with coordinate sightings and check-ins. Kitten joined the lead search vehicle. The beam from the Jeep cut across the brush as they moved slowly away from the station. "Ginger," one ranger called into the dark. "Ginger." But the savannah answered only with wind-distant insect song, and once far away, the eerie laugh of something that was not a friend. Kitten gripped the side rail as the Jeep rolled over uneven ground. He knew too well what waited out there at night. Jackals hunted in pairs through low grass. Hyenas traveled farther after dark, opportunistic and relentless. Venomous snakes moved silently near warm stones and brush roots. And above all of it, whether seen or not, the land belonged to lions. A younger ranger in the back seat said what none of them wanted to hear. If a predator found him first, he didn't finish. No one asked him to. They all knew. The hours wore on. The search widened. Jeep after Jeep combed the area near the station. Teams on foot checked shallow ditches, culverts, and patches of scrub where a frightened cat might hide. Thermal devices picked up hares, rodents, birds, even a sleeping dik-dik once, but never Ginger. By nearly midnight, exhaustion was beginning to settle into the team. Dust coated their boots and throats. Hope was thinning. Dr. Amina, who had stayed at the station that evening by chance after checking on an injured antelope, stood beside the command jeep and looked at the dark horizon. "We may have to continue in the morning," she said softly. Kitten looked at her, but didn't answer. He knew she was right. The longer they stayed out, the more dangerous it became, not just for Ginger, but for the people searching. Still, the idea of stopping felt like surrender. One last sweep, he thought. Just one more. The jeeps began angling back toward the station. That was when a ranger standing in the rear of the lead vehicle suddenly raised his hand. "Wait!" The jeep stopped. "What is it?" The ranger pointed toward the far side of a moonlit field. "There." At first, Kitten saw only movement, a large shape cutting slowly through the grass under the thin silver wash of the moon. The form was low and fluid. A lion, he thought at once, probably just crossing through the territory. But then the shape came closer, and something about the way it moved made Kitten's heart begin to pound. The jeep headlights shifted. A beam of pale light stretched across the grass and touched the animal. A lioness. She did not run from the light. She kept walking, and in her mouth, she was carrying something. The entire vehicle fell silent. Kitten leaned forward, barely breathing. As the lioness moved closer, the shape hanging gently from her jaws became clear. Orange fur, small body, dangling legs. "Oh my God," someone whispered. The cat in her mouth was Ginger. For a split second, Kitten's mind refused to accept it. Then he saw the way the lioness held him, not as prey, not by the torso, not in the brutal grip of a predator carrying a kill. She held him by the scruff, softly, carefully, exactly the way a lioness carries her cub. Ginger did not thrash. He did not cry out. His body hung calm and loose, as if this way of being carried was not terrifying at all, but familiar. Kitten's voice dropped to almost nothing. Impossible. The lioness kept walking toward the station. Not fast, not aggressively, just steadily as though she had made a decision and was seeing it through. When she moved into the full wash of the headlights, the lines of her face came clear. The scar across the shoulder, the slight notch in one ear, the gaze. Kitten felt the air leave his lungs. "Nala," he whispered. 2 years had passed. 2 full years. But there was no mistake. It was her. Dr. Amina stepped up beside him, eyes wide. That can't be. But it was. Nala stopped several meters from the rescue station fence. The night seemed to hold itself still. The engines idled softly. Radios went silent. No one moved. For a moment, Lioness and humans simply faced one another across the grass. Then Nala lowered her head. Slowly, carefully, she set Ginger down on the ground. The cat landed lightly, shook himself once, and trotted a few steps toward the station. Then he stopped and turned back. He looked up at Nala, not with fear, not with confusion, with recognition. Nala bent down and licked the top of his head. Once. A single gentle stroke. Exactly as she had done on the day she first accepted him. Exactly as she had done on the day she last let him go. No one spoke. No one dared disturb the silence. Ginger stayed close to her front legs for a few seconds, tail lifted, body angled toward her, as if some part of him still wanted to follow. But this time, Nala did not pick him up. She did not nudge him away from the humans. She did not try to reclaim what had once been hers to protect. Instead, she lifted her head, turned, and began to walk back toward the savannah. No roar, no hesitation, no glance over her shoulder. Just the long, steady stride of a creature who understood more than anyone had ever given her credit for. As if she knew Ginger had a place now, a life, a home. And as if she also knew that bringing him back tonight had been the only thing she needed to do. Kitten stood frozen, watching her silhouette move through the moonlit grass. Ginger remained where he was staring after her. The entire station seemed suspended in the kind of silence that comes only when something sacred has passed through it. Finally, Kitten spoke. She remembered him. No one answered because there was nothing to add. 2 years had passed. Rain and drought, heat and wind, distance and time. And still the lioness remembered the tiny creature who had once trembled beneath her body on the coldest night of the season. Still she had known him. Still she had carried him gently home. Nala disappeared into the darkness without a sound. Ginger stood there a few moments longer, eyes fixed on the place where she had vanished. Then at last he turned and walked back toward the station. Not hurried, not afraid. Just quiet, as though some old circle had finally closed. And behind him, beyond the fence, beyond the lights, beyond the reach of human hands, the vast savannah breathed on in the dark, keeping its mysteries as it always had. Thank you so much for watching this story with us. If this incredible moment between a lioness and a tiny kitten touched your heart, please take a second to like, subscribe, and support the channel. Your support helps us share more amazing true stories from the wild. See you in the next story.